It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Kendra Reichenau, CEO of Heartland America. Kendra is a transformational global executive with extensive experience leading well-known consumer-facing brands, spanning multinational public companies to owner-operator and founder-led organizations. She's been working since she was 10 years old and has a strong track record of driving results in general management, omnichannel merchandising, consulting, and strategy development. She's a clear communicator and developer of high-performing teams. After a sabbatical in Europe with her family during her high school years, she graduated with a degree in political science from Scripps College. Kendra started her corporate career in retail at Nordstrom, Gap, and Ann Taylor in various merchandising roles. Discovering that she needed to expand her horizons beyond retail to reach the C-suite, she embarked on a consulting career at Arthur Andersen, KPMG, and then opened her own consulting practice. Prior to becoming CEO at Heartland, she also held senior leadership positions at consumer product companies Kohler, Luxottica, and Colibar. Kendra Reichenau, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you. What a pleasure to be here today.
Great to have you here. And we got a chance to chat a couple of weeks ago and learned a little bit about your background, and really interested to kind of hear that progression. And, we always kind of start at the beginning, and that's kind of the early family life. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what that early family life was like.
I grew up in I grew up in Palo Alto, Menlo Park, California. My parents were immigrants. They came to
Cool.
America in 1968 with $1,000.
Wow.
My
From
father
where?
my father's British and my mother's
Nice.
Australian.
Cool.
And they were small business owners in downtown Palo Alto. My father was a photographer and my mother ran the gallery, and they really worked together for the first probably 25, 30 years.
Nice.
So, it was quite lovely. We were a close family. I worked in the gallery starting at a very young age.
Yeah.
I also worked at the coffee brewery next door. This is pre-Starbucks, right?
Yeah, right.
Joanne, it was Joanne's coffees, and she roasted the beans right there and bagged them and ground them. And
Love it.
I would work, Friday afternoons, kind of dusting off all the coffee ground dust.
Did you become a coffee drinker early on, Kendra?
I did not,
Yeah.
but I definitely have been working since I was 10 in kind
Yeah.
of local businesses, really all on University Avenue.
Right.
All
Lovely.
with my father. So I've been working for a very long time.
Yeah. And brothers and sisters, being an only child?
Yeah, I have one sister who
Uh-huh.
is 4 years younger, who was probably more of an academic than I
Right.
was.
Okay.
And so I think the good news is we both found things we loved early on, and I think it helped that they happened to be very different.
Yeah. Cool. Well, tell us some about those early years. What were some of the things that you learned from mom and dad growing up?
I think hard work.
Yeah.
And I believe my parents were very supportive around us both girls doing what we loved to do.
Hmm.
I ended up with my own clothing company by 13, where I kind of
Wow.
painted and decorated clothes and sold them in different boutiques all along,
Wow.
all the way from
Super cool.
Tahoe on down.
Kind of
Um,
blank T-shirt stuff,
yeah,
or did
blank
you?
T-shirt
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I put on fashion shows at the school, and I wasn't the
Awesome.
best student, but I my parents definitely supported a creative outlet in which I really enjoyed, working. So I've worked as a
Yeah,
receptionist, I've worked in movie, what was, rental movies, right? I've worked for
right.
Joanne's Coffee Roasting. I worked in another coffee shop. I mean, I really loved work. I loved the freedom. I
Yeah,
loved the independence, and I loved having my own money. My
right.
dad came up with a deal with me that I could have whatever I wanted as long as I paid for 50% of it.
Ah, great, good. So what did some of those early savings go towards?
Well, I was a good saver, so I had
Yeah,
my own savings book, which was really fun. But I
cool.
liked
The kind where
clothes.
you
I
go in
mean,
and they print it out and you
yes,
can see
exactly. Stamped it, and you'd see
stamp
your
it. You see
interest,
the
right?
interest on a
Exactly. Yeah.
separate line. Oh God, I love that. Yeah, yeah.
I
So
miss
cool.
that. Yeah. When
Right,
it's now all electronic, you don't
right,
really look at anything anymore.
right, right.
Um, I liked clothes. I mean, I still love clothes. I still love to spend my money on clothes,
Yeah.
which is just ridiculous and superficial, but it's definitely a part of who I am, and
Yeah.
I found a lot of joy in it. So,
Cool. Any other influencers, maybe special teachers or coaches? You mentioned school wasn't your number one subject, but were there things at school that you liked and excelled at?
I really loved art history.
Yeah,
I loved learning. I would say I didn't probably love the homework part. When I was a junior in high school, my parents decided that we should go live in Europe for a year, and
nice.
I didn't go to school. We traveled, and I
Cool.
really loved that. I loved traveling all across Europe.
How old were you at
Um,
the time?
I was 16, my
Oh,
sister was
nice.
12. And
Yeah.
this is pre-Google. This is
Right,
pre-Google
right.
Maps. This is
You rail
pre
pass, get
I
the
mean, all of
maps of
it. My
cities and so
my
forth.
it was a Michelin guide, right? It was
Michigan.
Michelin
Right,
maps. And
right.
my parents were very adventurous. They would open up the map and we'd say, "Okay, we're going to drive through Greece or Yugoslavia, or we're going to take the
Wow.
ferry." And we'd open up then the Michelin map and we'd plot our way, and
Figure out
then
how to get
we'd
there.
look at
Yeah.
the Michelin guide and we'd decide where we were going to stay, and we'd show up with no
Wow.
reservations, no force, using the Michelin guide as kind of our North Star. And I look back on it, we had all these American Express checks that my dad had
Sure.
like sewn
Travel
into his
checks. Yeah.
clothes and
Oh yeah.
sewn
Right.
hidden in the car. And kind of great. You look back on it and I think, oh my God, what an
Yeah.
adventure.
What a cool
We had never
adventure.
been to Turkey. We liked it so much. We stayed for 3 months, traveling all through it. If we didn't like a place, we would leave. If we liked it, we'd stay longer.
That's so
Um,
cool. Did Dad like sell the business, or was it something in between?
He
Took some time
did.
off.
It was
Yeah.
in between. He kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
took a break, and he decided my father was very adventurous, and
Yeah.
I just think he felt like this was just an amazing opportunity for us. And
So cool.
it was an
Yeah.
incredible journey,
Particularly at that age. Yeah, for both of
especially
you.
at that
Oh, so
age.
cool. Yeah.
And so I think that led to a lot of just travel passion and love
Right.
and interest of other cultures. And I think having parents that had green cards that obviously wanted to come to America, believe in
Right.
America, love the opportunity of America. Um, we probably were also brought up with more of a global view that
Yeah.
there are other viewpoints, there are other
Right.
countries, there are other influences. Um, and I think that has helped me be just have a kind of a broader view on the
More
world.
balance. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's so cool.
Hmm.
And were you born in the U.S. or
I was. Yep, Stanford Hospital. One of the few people that actually, was born in the Bay Area and
can
came from
claim
the
it?
Bay Area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can claim it. I love it. I love it. So you came back. So 16, you came back. You came back as a junior in high school or
I came
sophomore?
back as a senior with
A
no
senior. Okay.
junior year grades or
Okay.
SAT scores or
Got
ACT
it. Got it.
scores or anything, and it was a bit of a scramble. I had again unusual situation. The school recommended that I apply to one of the Claremont colleges,
Right.
and so
You end up going to Scripps,
I
right?
went to
Yeah.
Scripps. I flew
Yeah.
down, interviewed with no grades, no SAT scores, nothing, and got in. that day. They just said,
That's
yes, we'd love to
awesome.
have you. And
You
so
probably talked a little bit about your trip abroad for that year, I imagine.
I
Was there
did, I
stories?
did. I think, but I don't know, would colleges be that flexible today?
Probably not.
Probably
But it
not.
doesn't matter.
It's really interesting. I went to a high school called Castellea, which was an all-girls school, an incredible high school. And
Right.
it was, even back then, it was $15,000 a year. And my dad couldn't
Wow.
afford it, so he
Yeah.
bartered to be the school photographer, which I look back on and I think that would never happen today.
Yeah. Yeah.
These
Yeah.
very, very elite private schools, they wouldn't have bartered. I look back on some of these ways where schools were so more flexible that I just don't see that happening today,
No.
where,
No.
we pushed
Very
the
rare.
envelope a little bit and they embraced it, right?
Right.
And
That's so cool.
having my son has just left for college, I wonder, is there that kind of flexibility today? And
Yeah.
and in general, I just don't see it. But
Right.
so
Well,
I
the
feel
Carmike
very
colleges
fortunate.
are, yeah, Carmike College is known for for liberal studies, right? Liberal
Yes.
education. And Scripps is one of the best. Did you enjoy your 4 years there? And,
You know,
what did you study? And
I have to say, I really wanted to go to a big city.
yeah, yeah,
And my father was like, no, you can't. And I think I was still, I mean, you have to remember, I'm second generation, right? My
right,
parents
right,
didn't go to college.
yeah,
This was a really big deal for him.
right.
It was a big expense for him. And he really wanted me to be a lawyer. And I think
Mm,
my generation, that is second generation, I did a talk once, and we were all second generation immigrants, and we all got up on stage, and one woman said my father wanted me to be a lawyer or a doctor, and then the next one of us said my father wanted me to be a lawyer or an accountant. I said I wanted to be a lawyer, and the woman next to me is like, my father said I had to be a doctor. And I
crazy.
think back then those were the
Those are the professions.
professions
Yeah. Well, they made the
that
money, right?
made the
Those-
money.
yeah, right,
Exactly. And our
right.
parents wanted a better life for us.
Yeah,
So I was a
yeah,
poli
yeah,
sci major because, of course, my father wanted me to be a lawyer.
right.
And it's just interesting, right? That so I was poli sci. I actually got my degree at Claremont McKenna, because the way the colleges work, you can go to one school but take classes or get your
Got
degree
it.
from another.
Yeah, yeah,
If you wanted to be poli sci, you went through Claremont McKenna. But
right, right.
I think the colleges were fine. I had an unusual experience. My father actually went into bankruptcy my sophomore year,
Mm,
and
tough.
I had to move home.
Yeah.
And we actually all slept. I slept on the floor of a one-bedroom apartment for a
Wow.
year, and
Wow.
worked and went to school and earned enough money my junior year so I could go back my senior year. And I took 7 classes each semester so that I could graduate with my class.
Yeah.
And
Jeez. Wow.
you know, it was awful, but at the same time,
Built
you
some
know,
character.
what resiliency. Yeah, I
Yeah.
ended up
Yeah.
I worked for Nordstrom through college because I always had to pay
Right.
for part of college. And then
Right.
the year I was home, I was able to take classes at UC Berkeley and community college. And I got a job at Neiman Marcus where I was
Right.
the assistant manager for probably two different departments. I think it was designer and designer sportswear. And I had 19 people. And these are the days of service and
Right.
Tom Peters and
Sure.
going above and beyond for your customer and writing thank you notes and having a client
Yeah.
book and
Yeah.
merchandising the floor every day. And you learn some really good skills at Nordstrom and Neiman Marcus in those days, and you can earn
Great.
some
Great
decent
companies.
money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
What
it,
attracted you to retail? Was it
I
the
love
was it the
clothes.
apparel part of it? Yeah, I was going to say that wasn't hard to
There's a theme.
guess.
I love beautiful things.
Yeah, and you got a good
Um,
discount too, right? So God, what
exactly,
double
exactly.
benefit.
But I learned a lot. I learned a lot, and I got comfortable around. You learn. Especially at Neiman Marcus, our clients were very successful businesswomen. I mean, back then we were even selling $1,200 blouses, $3,000 suits. How to
Yeah,
interact with successful women, how to understand their style, how to
right.
properly serve them in a meaningful way. These are all these are all great
Yeah,
skills,
it's
right?
absolutely. Well,
And
and
so,
Nordstrom was famous for that too.
and
I think it
Nordstrom
was,
was famous,
yeah,
and
John Nordstrom.
yeah,
Is he the son or the grandfather? I can't recall, but I remember him being quoted, when asked, "How do you find such great people, and how do you recruit them?" And they're such great customers. And he looked at him kind of quizzically and said, "No, we don't train them. We basically find the people that have the right culture."
yep,
And they're raised that way, right? And
yep,
he would recruit against those criteria that just was excellence in terms of customer service, and then just further refine them once they were in.
exactly.
How long were you there at Nordstrom? You said that's where
At
you went first,
Nordstrom, I
right?
did three
Preschool.
summers.
Yeah,
I
got
did
it.
3 summers, 3 Christmases, and
Yeah,
3 Thanksgiving, right? I could come back
right,
for break. They
right.
would always be so pleased to have me, come in for a week or two because I could hit the
Sure.
ground running. I had my
Right.
client book. I could call all my clients, send everything out. I had a pretty good gig. But then
Yeah.
I think the management part and having that opportunity to manage that many people at such a young age, just, I learned how to do markdowns. I learned about inventory. It's all that last mile
Right.
execution
Right.
that when that I learned, what made things easy, what made things hard, that then helped me, I think, when I went into, merchandising and my first corporate job,
Yeah.
I had a good understanding of how it executed on the floor.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons I was able to get into that Gap merchandise training program was
Right.
because I could really speak. I really understood if, what the vision of corporate was and, how some of the challenges of the execution on the floor,
Right. Right.
which most kids just hadn't had that experience,
No.
right? So I do think sometimes your worst experiences are your best
Oh
ones.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And
You want
I
to
say
share
that
one with us?
often.
Can we share one in
Yeah.
particular that might
Yeah.
have been
I mean,
memorable
I
for you?
think I was fired once and it was horrible.
Mm.
And I had come back to the Gap. They had begged me to come back, and I flew in and interviewed for the day and saw all these old friends and just didn't really interview the company. I
Mm.
chatted with everyone, and I had been gone for I think 10 years or so, and
Right.
I didn't really spend the time to see how the company had changed
Changed. Yeah. Yeah.
versus how I had changed.
Right.
And I had 6 bosses in 11 months.
Oh my gosh.
And the sixth boss fired me on her 10th day. And it was the beginning of the downward spiral of the Gap.
Yeah.
And I think they'd already fired a large group of people before me. So it's not like I was the only person that was fired. But I didn't do my homework, and I
Mm.
think that was
Yeah.
the big change for me. It was the awakening of culture matters
Right. Right.
and
Very much.
finding your people matters
Yeah. Yeah.
and really understanding yourself
Right.
matters. And it took me a while to kind of it took me a while to recover from that.
Mm.
But at the same time, I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean,
Mm.
I don't mean it in a bad way, but everyone needs to get fired once in their
Yep.
life,
Yep.
because you learn a lot. If you
Yeah.
choose to,
Right.
you can learn a lot in
Yeah.
many ways that
It's
can really
humbling, but it gives you an
it's
opportunity
humbling,
for
yeah, and
perspective.
kind of own your own shit a little bit,
Yeah. Right. Right.
So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's okay. We'll let that one go.
thank you.
Now, you spent a number of years in retail, including obviously your college time. You mentioned
Yep.
Gap, and I know that you
Hmm.
obviously had some time at Neiman's, and then you kind of took a little bit of a turn and went into consulting for a number of
Yeah,
years. I know
I
you
did.
worked for KPMG, and then you did your own thing, and Arthur
Yep.
Andersen, back and forth. Tell us a little bit about kind of that change and that pivot in your career. What led you in down the consulting path and felt that was the right
You
choice for you at that time?
Yeah, I was at Ann Taylor and McKinsey was doing a large um,
Mm,
eh, project for us where they were really changing the way we um, really went to market and designed
right,
products and
rebranding. Yeah.
executed.
Mhm,
And
yeah.
uh, the board and McKinsey and our CEO at the time were fighting vehemently. And we all were hearing rumblings, right, of just the challenges that were going on at the board level.
Right.
and our CEO did not want to change. And the McKinsey manager I had chatted with, because I was curious, I wanted to learn.
Yeah.
Uh, and she said to me, "You merchants," she goes, "you just think you know everything, but you don't." And I thought to myself, oh, well, she's right. I don't know. I think merchants always run the company, but the reality
Hmm.
is I don't really know how the other areas work.
Hmm.
And if I'm ever going to be the head, how am I going to
Yeah.
learn? And
Yeah.
so I thought about business school, and I realized that my grades weren't very good. And the reality is I really didn't like going to school. And third of all, I didn't want to take on any debt, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought, well, maybe I could go be a consultant and I could get paid to learn.
Mm. Good choice.
And
Yeah.
so I figured out a way to get a job with a consulting firm that was known for retail, and it was called Webb and Shirley, and they had been purchased by KPMG, and they were doing the exact projects that McKinsey had been doing with Gap
Wow.
and Ann Taylor.
Right.
And at the time, this Webb and Shirley team um, was doing it at the Limited, and they again the CEOs were struggling to understand what the new world was going to look like.
Right.
And so they hired me as their SME, which is a subject matter expert,
Right.
to explain how it worked in the new world, because I had actually gone through this transformation now once at Gap and once at Ann Taylor.
Right.
And so I spent about a year and a half on this project working with the Victoria's Secrets team to
Ah.
help them transform to this new way of designing and sourcing and executing products.
Yeah. Cool.
And I mean, these were legendary people, and it was a thrill. It was a
Yeah.
thrill. And then that's what moved me into consulting. So,
Right.
then you learn how all the other, I did a logistics network study. I've done some system implementations. I've led different types of, business operation improvement work. And so through doing that, whether it's through a big company or on my own, I've really learned how companies work. I've learned
Mm.
how to assess organizations. I've learned how to prioritize. I've learned how to build out decks and communicate with boards and communicate
Right.
with CEOs. And, I got paid to learn, right?
Nice.
And
You achieved
I
your
think
goal.
I achieved my goal. And
Yeah.
I think there's a couple things I think everything should happen to people. One, I do think everyone should get fired once. Two, I think everyone should live in New York for a couple of years.
Yep.
And three,
Hmm.
ideally, I think everyone should go into consulting for a couple of years, because
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you learn how to look and evaluate and assess in a way that you just don't when you're in your own little world, in your own little job. You're so looking down, you don't learn how to look out.
Right. Right.
And I think it's really valuable.
Yeah, super cool. So the next big career pivot was kind of getting to where you are now in the consumer
Mhm.
products area, right? You,
Mhm.
you worked
Mhm.
for a division of one of the largest, eyewear companies in the world. You had some time at Kohler. You obviously
Mhm.
did Kula Bar as well, and
Mhm.
we won't be able to talk about all of those, but again, help us with kind of that transition. So you did the consulting gigs for about a decade, right? Eight
Yep.
to 10 years. I
On and
think you
off. Yep.
consolidate everything
Mhm.
on and off, a couple of things in between, and then kind of zeroed in this area of consumer goods. I know there's some furnishings and so forth in there too, but again, help us with the thinking and kind of your sector choice there and what
Well, I
settled you into
think,
this one.
in the last few, so it's probably in the last 15 years or so, I've been, at that president
Yeah,
CEO level.
right.
I like transformations. I am
Hmm.
not a maintainer.
Yeah,
And so usually I'm attracted to it because, one, I think there's a great core product or value, and two, it's struggling and it
yeah,
needs help in its transformation. And I
right.
like the complexity of that. There's a
Mm,
lot of
mm,
moving parts.
yeah,
It requires a little bit of roll up your sleeves,
right.
but it's also incredibly satisfying.
Yeah,
And being able to really galvanize the team and get everyone aligned and together transform an organization is really satisfying. And
Yeah.
so I pick the projects because they speak to me in a way that I think I really can add value. And that's rewarding. And I work because I think it's fun.
Do you go through a process where you kind of look at the core and say, gosh, there's something there that I really
Yes.
think is worthwhile, but they got some issues, right? And
Yep.
we got to transform or turn
Yes.
around. Is that kind
Yep.
of, because you worked for some
Yeah.
great brands. I mean, you think of
Yeah.
Kohler, you think of
Yes.
obviously I can't remember the name of the company. Was it NGL Optics? I think that's the looks at
Oh, and
um,
3L Optics. Yeah, I mean,
N3L
Oakley's a
Optics,
great
right?
brand, right?
Yeah,
Oakley's a great
yeah,
brand,
right,
and that
right,
was really a growth story, where we were working with Oakley, but definitely my Nordstrom experience when I went back to corporate with Halogen, that was a turnaround brand.
right,
The
right.
McGuire was a turnaround brand, an old, beautiful heritage company that
Yeah,
you needed to make look more modern and contemporary and kind of morph it into today's living space. Everything was kind of designed around the formal dining room, and people don't
right.
really design formal dining
Yeah,
rooms
yeah,
anymore.
right, right.
Coolabar was just this incredible brand that the clothes look like you were ill and sick and dying of something, and really sun protection should make you feel great so you can get
Right.
outside. And even with Heartland America, just creating the discipline and rigor of finding great values and great deals. They all have something there. They all have
Yeah,
something there.
yeah.
It's
There was a
just
core there. Yeah,
there's a
yeah,
core there. You just need to find the discipline and rigor of, the coordination, the vision, the execution, the process, you know, streamlining things, data, using your data, having clarity of the data. All these things matter.
right.
And having a team that's on board, getting people on board, getting people, usually having a couple quick wins at the beginning to get the buy-in so
Yeah,
that everyone's like, yeah, okay, this is starting to make
this is going
sense.
to work. Yeah,
This is going to work. This is
yeah.
exciting. This feels good. This is hard, but this feels good.
So you're going into your second year, right, at
Yep,
Heartland,
correct.
and so still early days. Tell us a little bit about the company and what were some of those core things that attracted you there, and some of the challenges that you're facing now.
Again, I think this is a company that's been around for 40
Yeah,
years.
it's been around a long time.
It's a catalog business. We
Right.
provide great values to the customer. So we're a really value-driven company, but it had been, you
And
know,
Heartland focused, both in its
Heartland
headquarters
focused. That's
and,
correct.
and product offering, right?
And product offering, yes. But I think, there's something nice about having value. We have a large call center, and our customers call us on the phone. And I think, uh, as you get older, it's not always easy to get, it's sometimes it's nice to talk to people on the phone. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's a little bit of our secret sauce. It's
Mm,
sometimes it's confusing. People have questions. People
right,
want to order, they're just not 100% able to buy everything online, and or they they don't trust the same as
yeah,
it just
right,
gets
yeah,
harder, I think, as you get
yeah,
older. You can't see as well, you can't hear as well, blah blah blah. And I think we provide, again, a level of service that the world kind of doesn't appreciate anymore.
absolutely. Yeah. Do you get on calls? Do you listen to consumer calls? And
Yeah, we do. I
yeah,
definitely do, and I
yeah,
definitely respond, and
right,
I read all our customer reviews, and we rate how our salespeople perform,
yeah,
and I do, monthly town halls, and we do a lot
cool,
of recognition around service and feedback, and just a lot of positive team building, service related activities to keep
right,
everyone engaged. It's important.
yeah.
Service
And
is
what were some of
important.
the challenges when you came in? Had it gotten a little stale?
Probably,
Had the
I
brand?
mean, I think the biggest challenges was the lack of data,
Okay,
and probably, the lack of management on just processes and
right,
not a lot of silos, not a lot of discipline around the
Mm,
inventory. Inventory's cash.
right, right.
Really understanding I think there just wasn't a great understanding of the levers of the business. And, it just takes prioritizing, what are we going to focus on? What are we going to get clarity on?
Yeah,
And the team's been amazing. I mean, I've got a lot of people who have been there 20 years or longer.
right.
I'm amazed how long they've stayed and been with the company and how loyal they are and how much they love the company. And so
Leadership
they've
matters.
it does, and they're on board. Like, I'm so
Yeah,
proud of them. I can't
yeah,
tell you. They just are like, I get it. You're right. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, okay. And their grit and determination to change
right.
has been tremendous.
So looking at kind of the arc of your leadership, starting in obviously your early retail period, the consulting where you kind of got, exposed to a lot of the things, and now focused in on this particular consumer product business. What's been consistent in what have you changed? Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about, the principles that you keep applying that, seem to work for you, and what have you had to modify, if anything, in terms of your
Oh,
approach?
I've had to modify. I am very direct, and
Yeah.
I think that's both my greatest strength and an enormous weakness, right? Um, I'm not good with politics. I don't really play games. I'm a straight shooter. It can feel harsh. Um, Not everyone likes it.
Hmm.
I think people who like it love it. It can be a little alienating.
Yeah.
I've definitely tried to soften over the years. I am relatively more patient than I used to be. Uh, I think, I definitely was impatient, slightly intolerant. And so I've had to soften. I've
Yeah.
definitely had to soften. I've definitely had to mellow. I've definitely had to, learn how to take 3 breaths. Um,
Count to 10.
Count to
Sometimes
10.
20.
We all have different skills.
Right, right.
And so I think, usually I have to take more. I've learned I have to take more time to bring people along with me, even
Yeah,
though I can see so clearly down the
yeah,
path and
yeah.
around the
Right,
corner.
right, right.
How do I bring people along with me? And I think I've learned how to do that
Good.
better.
Yeah,
Uh, and so I think I'm a better leader now uh, than I was, just through trial and error,
right.
and listening to the feedback
Sure.
when I'm kind of too much.
Yeah,
We all have to, we all have something, right? We all have to work on certain things, and some things we can
absolutely.
change and some things we can't. But
Right.
I think I'm definitely a better leader than I was.
You talked about company culture earlier and how important that is. And, a 40-year-old company, I mean, you came in, there's a culture established there. How much time do you spend, kind of modifying or tweaking that culture, and also, propagating it? I mean, how do you go about, particularly coming through the pandemic, and so many of us been working remote and so forth, you know, embracing culture and communicating that outward is ultimately the CEO's job.
Yep.
And I'm always curious on different approaches and how CEOs make that happen. So what's your secret
Yeah,
sauce in that
yeah.
area?
I mean, first of all, I walk the talk,
Yeah,
right? I show up every day,
yeah.
and I'm on time. I'm prepared, um, and
Demonstrate the kind of behavior
I'm
you want to
I'm
see in
intent.
others. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
yeah, yeah,
intentional.
yeah.
I think having a monthly town hall
Mm.
where you recognize people, you recognize customers,
Is
you
it an all
share.
hands, all,
It's
all
all
employees?
hands.
Yeah, yeah,
We
cool.
share success stories.
Right.
It's well prepared.
Yeah,
I think has really matters. I have 2 different kinds of management meetings a week that are very focused, have an agenda, that get the teams working together,
right.
talking, learning. I think these kinds of intentional points where we work together really matter,
Mm.
um, because then we can share successes, right?
Yeah, right.
There's an ongoing sharing of successes all the time, so that people understand what we're doing is working, and if it's not working, how do we pivot,
Right.
right?
Super
And I
cool.
think that's what the team sees is communication, follow
Yeah.
up and follow through, in general successes. The reality is we don't have to be right. We only, I think, have to be right 7 out of 10 times to be
Right. Right.
successful. We can
Yeah.
afford to fail every once in a while. And if we're not occasionally failing, we're not trying.
Yeah. Got it. Love it. What do you look for when you're investing in the people that you hire at Heartland?
Um, in general, I like people that are self motivated,
Mm,
that are confident enough to admit when they don't know how to do something.
yeah.
I like people who are confident, who kind of like themselves, right? I appreciate I can work with a lot of different kinds of people, and I've learned over the years to appreciate what people are good at. I try to focus on people's strengths, not
Right.
try and focus on their weaknesses. But I
Yeah.
do think it's easier to work with people when they fundamentally like who they are.
Mm, mm,
I think they tend to be more confident
right.
and
How
more
do you get
able.
at that in an interview situation? Do you have some
I
favorite
think you
interview
can kind
questions
of
to use?
tell, right, if
Yeah.
someone,
Yeah.
as you ask them questions, how they
Yeah.
answer, how they respond, you can kind of tell because they're willing to admit things, right? If you're
Yeah.
confident, you can say, look, I've had to work on this, or, you can ask, what are your strengths? What are your opportunities? And when people can't really answer what opportunities or, you know, what was their worst experience and why, and they can't answer those questions honestly, it tells me that they're not really honest with
Yeah.
themselves.
Right. Right.
You could ask me, what's your worst experience, and I told you I was fired, and
Right.
who knows how many
Sure.
people this is going to go out to.
Right.
Right.
Right. Hey, it's
uh,
nothing to be
it,
ashamed of. I think that if you
it's
learn through it,
especially if you learn through it, and
yeah. Yeah.
that's the type of, I like myself, I like who I am, I know I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm willing to learn from them. Those are the
Yeah.
kind of people I like to have on the team.
Yeah. Awesome. What's been the biggest lesson that Heartland's learned through the pandemic? As we're now apparently going out of it, but to be
Yeah.
seen, I guess.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think we learned that, it hasn't been easy. I'll be candid. There's been some real ups and downs,
Yeah.
and I think we're still trying to figure out the customer. What do they want? There is lack of consistency going on right now, and there's a lot of
Right.
fickleness, and there's a lot of up and down, and we have great weeks, and then we have not great weeks, and there seems to be a lot of emotion that our customer, being an older customer,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
feels. So if the
Feels. Yeah.
market's down, or gas prices are up, or
Right.
there's a shortage of something, you can see this kind of emotional up and down with them, and I think it's hard to predict.
Right.
And so
Right.
I don't think our company, we're still going up and down, like we're still trying to figure
Yeah.
figure some things out in the customer behavior. There
Yeah.
just seems
Yeah.
to be a lot of volatility.
Yeah. It's going to be an ongoing process for some time, I think, for
I
many of
think
us.
it's going to be, I think it
Yeah.
is, yes.
Did you guys go fully remote, or did you keep a core, people in
Well,
the
we have a
office? And
warehouse,
yeah.
so the warehouse team came in every day throughout the
Right.
entire
Sure.
pandemic.
Kept shipping.
I
Right.
really didn't join until everyone was back to hybrid. So
Right.
for me,
Right.
I believe they were 100% remote except for the warehouse team.
Yeah.
Uh, and they managed it incredibly well. It worked well. They were able to work through it. We have been hybrid since last year,
Right.
and that seems to be working well.
Yeah.
So we're in a few days a week, and then we're at home a couple days,
Right.
and I think that's worked out best for
Yeah.
everyone.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Kendra, we're just about out of time, but we always have one last question we ask all our CEO guests, and that's what kind of career and life advice would you give someone who maybe has their eyes on the corner office someday and hopes to get there?
I think work is everything.
Hmm.
I think you need to get a job in high school. I think you
Yeah.
need to get jobs in college. Uh, I've had my son working since he was 12, 13,
Good work
under the
ethic.
counter. I don't
Yeah.
care. Uh, Gritty work matters, and I
Yeah.
believe you need a couple jobs where you kind of start at the bottom and you learn. All work
Yeah.
experience is good. And again, I think I've said it before, even a bad work experience is a good work experience. And so I think, I read somewhere that only less than a third of all kids right now have after school jobs. And I thought,
Wow.
it's down from like 2/3 of,
Jeez.
20, 40 years ago or something. And I thought these kids are missing out on
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
skills that will help them navigate what they want to do or what they
Right.
like, and I think it really matters. We
Yeah.
spend the majority of our life working, it takes the majority of our time. We need to figure out things we love to do, right? And the only
Yeah.
way to do
That's
that
right.
is through trial and error.
Figure
And
out the stuff you don't like.
yeah, exactly. Or the stuff you're good at,
Right. Right.
you know, I think I would really encourage all people to get as much work exposure
Yeah.
um, as they can,
Yeah.
and talk to people or network and learn what other jobs are out there, because I think part of
Right.
it is, as the world is changing, what's out there, right?
Cool. Well, Kendra Reichenau, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.